Hi, and welcome to The Seeker
and The Skeptic.
I'm Kat, and I'm the flaky, unpredictable, maybe a bit irrational Seeker.
And I'm Rebecca. I'll be your sarcastic, grumpy, close-minded, skeptical host. Or maybe we should just be ourselves.
Sounds good to me. This podcast is going to dive deep into the controversial topics that some may call New Age, or woo-woo, or just plain foolish.
And hopefully look at them with a skeptical but open-minded approach that will encourage understanding and acceptance from both the skeptics
and the seekers.
Okay, so this episode is going to be a bit different. We're trying out a new format to answer listeners' questions. So if you want to throw us a question through Twitter or on our email, which is hello@seekerandskeptic.com, we'll try and get round to answering them in future episodes. But since this is our first one, I'm going to take the opportunity to ask Kat a question that I've been wondering about because she brings it up very often and the most inopportune times. What exactly is this Saturn Return thing you keep talking about?
Right, I'm so glad you've asked. Finally, I get to explain the whole thing. So, a Saturn return, we're talking, of course, about an astrological concept here. We have a whole episode about astrology. We have two, in fact, so you can find those episodes linked to in the show notes at seekerandskeptic.com. But basically, a Saturn return is a fairly modern concept, at least in the history of astrology. And actually, a lot of people have heard of it. So this is one of the few kind of astrology terms that does kind of end up going into more mainstreamy thought.
I feel like I hear it a lot, but I'm not exactly sure what it means. And people just say it as if I should know. So I tend to nod and smile.
Sure. So this is what is like literally happening. Saturn is obviously at a certain place in our birth chart when we're born. It takes approximately 29 and a half years to make its way back to that exact same spot in the sky. And that is what is called a Saturn return. And obviously it happens again in our late 50s. But really, for most people, that first Saturn return, aged between 28 to 30 is usually when it begins. And it can last about 3 years, depending on, again, Saturn's retrograde cycle.
So that's when you say it can last 3 years, Saturn will sit in that place in the sky, in that region of the sky.
It will make the exact point where it crosses your exact Saturn for a shorter period of time. Maybe that's, I don't know, but less, a couple of weeks. The 3 years is usually the time it is in the zodiac sign.
Okay. So I'm Aries. When Saturn comes back round to being in the section of the sky that we call the Aries section of the sky.
No, because not all of your planets are in Aries. Only your sun is in Aries. I believe Saturn, you've got Saturn in Sagittarius, which would make sense.
Of course she knows that off the top of her head.
Which is in your first house. Anyway, I will say that it would have been in Sagittarius then for those 3 years between, we'll talk about this maybe at the end, but
I'm still not understanding. Okay, so it's about when Saturn comes back into the same place it was when I was born.
Yes.
Okay. And for me, that's Sagittarius.
Yeah.
Okay, I get what you're saying.
But,
right?
the exact point, the exact degree will be for a short period. But your Saturn return is the whole time it's in that 30 degrees of the sky.
Okay, I'm with you.
So yours will be between December 23rd, 2014 and December 19th, 2017. That will have been your Saturn return. So throughout this show, maybe think about those years between 2014 and 2017 and what you're up to. So Saturn is not really thought of as a very cheery planet. The reasons for that are actually pretty obvious. It's the furthest visible planet away, with the naked eye. It's dark and dim. So it just looks not as cheerful and bright as Venus and Jupiter.
But it's got those fun rings.
I know. See, this is actually something that I did think about when I first started learning about the meaning of Saturn. I thought, are we forgetting about these sweet rings that it has? It's the pretty planet. And also, I believe it rains diamonds on those rings.
What?
Yeah, it rains diamonds on Jupiter too. But...
Wait a minute. Do you get this from...
No, this is real.
Astrologers or astronomers?
Astronomers.
Okay.
Say this. You can find that on NASA's website.
We'll put a link to it in the show notes.
If I can find it. So, not the cheeriest planet. Saturn itself signifies in astrology constraints. restriction, rejection, isolation, coldness, melancholy, depression. Get the gist?
Okay.
And a time of a Saturn return can be either described as a time of great achievements and peak accomplishments, or a time of great obstacles, restriction, and loss.
Wait a minute, isn't that like a classic rainbow ruse? Like you say two things the exact opposite in one sentence.
They're not the exact opposite. They are like characteristics of the same thing. So when you really think about Saturn as a character, things like it's very serious and focused and disciplined. These can all be really good things, right? But no one's saying it's cheerful. No one's saying it's a time of like abundance and ease.
Okay, yeah.
And like fun and joy. Like that's not it.
So it's either going to be like hard work but really rewarding or hard work and horrible.
And just like
but it's definitely going to be hard work.
Yeah, basically. And yeah, so like I said, Saturn is thought of as the greater malefic. This is like out of Saturn and Mars, it's the kind of the big bad. It has the power to harm or deny specific things. The planet itself isn't evil, right? It's worth noting this. It just distributes
evilness.
Anyway, you don't need to know more about Saturn, I suppose. But more ideas about Saturn returns. So some of those Saturn vibes, like the hard work, discipline, they can just be intensified in that time. You might, start a new kind of like routine. You might just get a bit more like hard and disciplined on yourself and your own like work.
And this is generally happening to most people around their 20, when they're about 29?
Late 20s, okay. 28, 29, 30, yeah. The endings and beginnings of things. So also you can imagine the time, like you might get married. I mean, if you have a Saturn return, maybe in your 7th house, maybe that happens. Consolidation, resolution. So like kind of like bringing things to a close. You might finish a book that you've been working on. You might face difficulties and challenges. Responsibility. So you take on a new responsibility. And there's also more structure and solidifying of things. Let's say you've had all of these ideas in your mid-20s, but finally they actually turn into something in your late 20s.
Okay, yeah. That sounds like a very common experience.
All of those things sound like something that would happen in your late 20s. I can see that. So as something that's interesting is like, let's say you go for your first astrology reading and you want to know about your Saturn return and if what's to expect. I think that's like, there's an ethical implication there for, I think, the astrologer. You don't want to scare somebody by saying, like,
the big bad's coming.
Doom and gloom. Yeah, especially if you don't know very much about like the details. But at the same time, like there isn't a whole lot you can do. I mean, some would say that there are ways to mitigate the effects of it. Like you want to please Saturn and maybe it will be nice to you.
How would you please Saturn?
Some would say that you could do some like magic and stuff.
Hula hooping. But yeah, obviously.
I really like that. I think Saturn would approve. But it's better to accept that, this will be a difficult time and this too shall pass. But yeah, so how to work out how bad your Saturn return will be, whether you were born in the day or night.
I was born in the night.
You were, so you will have a worse time.
Oh.
Or have had. You've had it. It's all good. Well, you've had your first one. You've still got hopefully another to look forward to. So Saturn is... Basically, he's going to be nicer to you in the day, if you're born in the day, than at night. Saturn is less malefic, as it were, more constructive.
Is that because you can see Saturn clearer at night?
There's a big explanation, which I won't be going into.
Okay, fair enough.
But just know that, like, it's the day. He's off the day sect.
You've got us in casual mode. These episodes where we're just answering questions, we're more or less just going off the top of our heads.
Otherwise, we could do, again, another 2-hour episode on this. So we're thinking about, like, responsibility, productivity in the day. At night, it might be more to do with loss and failure. Yeah. So there are other things to look at, like to see how it would affect your life, what house it is in. So you can pull this up. Like, if you were to do a birth chart, go to astro.com, you'll be able to cast your own chart, have a look at it. There are houses, so these are numbered 1 to 12. These all have different topics associated with them. You can also look at the house that it rules.
When you say different topics, you mean like work,
yeah, exactly.
money, relationships, that
all
sort of thing.
Stuff. So yours is in the first house, which is the self, really. It's like it's most like personal, about the self, and
so personal loss and failures in the nighttime is what you're saying.
Yes. And the houses it rules. So Saturn is naturally at home in Capricorn and Aquarius. Sagittarius, it's not in a terrible place in Sagittarius, but it's not in the best place. Whereas in my chart, it is in Capricorn, which isn't the worst place to have it.
Why, when you're saying it's better or worse, why? Like what?
Because planets have their natural homes. It's like you feel more at home when you're in your own home, so you're more like effective at doing things.
Is it because the sort of the symbology of those planets match, or
match those signs? Yeah, I mean it's a lot to do with. Jeez, why do you have to ask the hard questions? It's a lot to do with like time of year.
Okay.
And things like that. It's all like associations, but there are reasons, yes.
Oh, so like winter is a time of quiet and introspection. So a planet like
Capricorn. I'm sorry, Saturn is going to be happy in Capricorn, right? In Aquarius, that happens at winter.
Oh, it all makes perfect sense.
It does, doesn't it? It's
you
beautiful.
convince me. Sign me up.
And you can look at other planets in that sign. So maybe you've got a nice friendly planet like Jupiter or Venus in there, you're going to have a nicer time too. But if it's like conjunct Mars, and a lot of people born with Saturn in Capricorn in the late 80s conjunct Uranus and very near Neptune, and maybe there's a whole conjunction with all of those. So again, you can Google all of these things.
So there's like groupings. You said
Yes.
there's lots of people born in the late 80s who...
Yeah, who will be having the Saturn in Capricorn. And actually, as the time of recording, we're all going through a Saturn return.
Oh, but how can I be going through a Saturn return
You're
if
not.
I already had... Okay, so we're not.
You've had one.
Okay.
You entered yours in 2017.
Oh, I thought you meant we're all as in everyone on the planet. You just
No.
meant your little gang.
Saturn in Capricorn.
Okay.
Yeah. So, like I said, if you do this online, you'll be able to sort of see these things and then just like look up, okay, so what does Saturn in Aquarius mean? Whatever it is. But yeah, I thought we could talk a little bit about our own Saturn returns.
I'm trying to
remember
think.
anything between 2014 and 2017?
No, it's all a blur.
While you think, I mean, my own, like I said, I've got a day chart, Saturn in the 7th house, which rules relationships as well as contracts. And Saturn is also ruling that house, as well as the 8th house, which is death and debt. So that's not so nice. Neptune and Uranus are also hanging out there with Saturn. Uranus has a lot to do with like surprise and shock. Neptune is more to do with like kind of like, it can be kind of like spiritual matters, but a lot to do with like deception and like blurred lines. And so the month where that Saturn hit the exact degree of where it was in my birth chart, that was the month that I booked my flights to Peru. So that trip to Peru, which happened a few months later, that was my first time drinking ayahuasca, which led to some major life changes, including me spending the following year, which I'm currently in the midst of, traveling. So I'm still on that trip, and like a lot of that is like, okay, well, there's definitely change here, but those 7th and 8th house things haven't quite like manifested.
So what would you expect to see with 7th and 8th houses?
So I've still got another year of it. So here are some things that might happen in 2020. It's quite possible that I will meet somebody who, you know, maybe becomes a long-term partner. I also might get a long-term business contract, or I might die horribly in debt.
Oh, so many possibilities.
But because it's in the day chart in Capricorn, I mean, I'm sort of optimistic. But, well, I have until December 2020 to find out. I'll keep you updated, listeners. Rebecca's Saturn return, well, like I said, night chart. So Saturn is less content there. Saturn is in your first house. So like I said, self-expression, identity, all of those kind of, the body. Ruling your 11th house, which represents groups, and your 12th house, which is more like spiritual matters, but also like psychological matters. And Uranus is in that first house too. So again, maybe some surprises.
Interesting. I feel like I could go through my life and find things that would confirm that. Like I could play a little game we call confirmation bias and go and say, well, yeah, that time. When we were talking about recording this episode, you texted me to say, what time did you get into skepticism? And now I understand why.
Yeah,
because that would have been really convenient if that was my
so
Saturn
convenient.
return. But it wasn't. That was like my early 20s. No, like early to mid 20s.
I've got another theory. What about, did you start work with the graphic novels in that time?
Oh.
Right? Because I thought self-expression, identity.
Maybe vaguely around that time. I really wish I kept diaries. But I think that's the thing. I think if you said that, collection of things, self-expression, identity, bad stuff because it's bad news. I think I could pick through my life and find an example from every year.
Sure.
That is to do with self-expression, identity, and I've had a bit of a bad time. So,
but this is the thing, like you're not looking at all of the times because Saturn is in your chart all of those times. It's in your first house. It's always going to be a thing. And it's always making different aspects. But like to think of like a period, almost like a chapter in a book.
Yeah.
Which is like characterized by this like Saturnian flavor, and to see at what point is that happening in a certain area of your life. I mean, I personally find it very helpful, regardless of like the validity of all of this. I think it's helpful to kind of put that all into context and being like, okay, I can kind of like look at that as a chapter in my life.
Yeah.
Just like Saturn is in that chapter of my chart.
There's a book called Passages. I think I might have mentioned it before on the podcast. Gail Sheehy, I think. I was recommended to read it by someone, Ray Hyman. He's a skeptic who teaches people to cold read. And cold reading is, as we know, what skeptics think that a lot of mediums and people who say they're psychics are doing, where they're just picking up on little details of what people say and pretending they know what they think. And this book is really useful for someone who's learning to be a cold reader, because it takes apart a human life in years. And I can't remember exactly how it works out, but it's like your 20s are like this, your 30s are like this, your 40s are like this, and gives you a description of what those chapters of your life typically for the average person is like. Because most people get married at roughly the same age, and most people have children at roughly the same age. Most people have career transitions at roughly the same age. But that book's written in the 60s. And so I was reading it going, this doesn't work anymore.
Right.
And then they say, like, how old is the idea of the Saturn return? Because you said it was fairly recent.
Well, it not like very recent. Apparently it goes back to ancient time, like maybe 175 CE. Like it's in the last like couple of thousand years.
Oh, okay. Because I'm just thinking, like, back in the day, like maybe now in our late 30s is the time people in our age group are getting married. But back in the day, you would already be married and settled.
Yeah.
So it's weird how those points, those chapters in our lives and how they relate to our age, and obviously where things are in the sky, will be like, maybe the concept of Saturn return is popular now because now we have a culture where in our late 20s, it's a big time for career and family and marriage and all that stuff. Whereas before, people didn't care so much about Saturn return because by the time you're in your late 20s, things were quite settled.
It's a theory. I don't... Yeah, neither here nor there. But I just one more thing. And did you start publicly speaking to groups of people in that time?
Oh God, I wish I could remember more.
Well, I met you at Toastmasters.
Yeah, but that wasn't
was in 2017. That was in 2017.
What time were we talking about? Wait a minute, how old was I then?
It doesn't
we
matter.
haven't known each other that long.
This Saturn return lasted until the end of December 2017.
Okay, yeah, so Toastmasters was when I first started talking, tried to learn to do public speaking. 11th
house.
Which has become quite a big part of my life now.
Yeah, first house, 11th house. That's Saturn.
Well, case closed.
There we go. But I mean, I think that's quite a beautiful thing to see, even if it's like, okay, other things happened in that time too. Of course they did. But this is why I think Saturn returns can be helpful, but not when they used to scare the living crap out of people. Because it's not like, I mean, they don't sound like the worst 3 years of your life. Otherwise, you'd probably remember something.
Yeah, I think I've heard them in reference to celebrities who've died at that age.
Oh, the 27 Club. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a little
so that's an example of scaring people.
Sure.
With threats of Saturn.
Yeah. There are more. I recommend people check out the website SaturnReturnStories.com. You'll find some more stories there about celebrities and all that jazz.
Yeah, the problem with all that stuff, though, is it's kind of cherry-picked evidence, right? Because it's just anecdotes from people. Well, we can't take
every single... Maybe that was the concept, was like, let's get all of the Saturn return stories.
But no one who had a really boring Saturn return is going to write in their story and go, my Saturn return was exactly the same as every other year.
I've still got a year, and if I don't get married or die in debt, I am going to be so annoyed.
You will officially give up astrology. You'll have Skeptic tattooed on your forehead.
All right, any more questions about Saturn returns?
No, I think that covers it all. I mean, if our listeners have any questions, hit us up, or hit us up with any other questions. The email address is hello@seekeranskeptic, and we're on Twitter, Seeker Skeptic. We're also on Instagram, Seeker Skeptic. So send us a photo of your questions, maybe? Hope to hear from you.
Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Let us know with a tweet or an email. We'd really love to hear about your experiences.
Yes, please tell us what we got wrong. You can email us at hello@seekerandskeptic.com and follow us on Twitter and Instagram @seekerskeptic.
You'll find the show notes for this and every episode at seekerandskeptic.com.
And if you're interested, you can find my skeptically themed comics at rebeccaonpaper.com or follow me on Twitter @RebeccaOnPaper.
And I'm at yoga_astrology on Twitter. And you can find me exploring the intersection of yoga and astrology at yogaandastrology.com.
If you liked what you heard and fancy supporting the show and spreading the word, we'd really appreciate a rating and review in the Apple Podcast Store or wherever you're listening.
Or just tell somebody you know about the show. Thanks for listening.